On November 12, 1942, in Richmond, California, a monumental cargo vessel, stretching 441 feet and weighing an immense 490,000 pounds, stood poised to glide into the San Francisco Bay from the docks of Permanente Metals Corporation's Yard No. 2. Feel the astonishing reality that this ship had been brought into existence in a mere 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. In the world of traditional shipyards, master craftsmen had dedicated 6 to 8 months to constructing vessels of a comparable scale since before the American Revolution. And yet right here, a fully formed Liberty ship was primed for duty. More than 1,000 workers stepped away from the hull of the SS Robert E. Perry, a workforce not of conventional shipwrights or seasoned maritime artisans, but of individuals who were once secretaries, farmers, housewives, and laborers, now transformed into welders after just weeks of training. Imagine the assembled crowd of officials, journalists, and rival shipyard owners all gathered to witness a spectacle that would ignite a deep and lasting transformation in industrial production. You are watching a systematic revolution born from American manufacturing ingenuity that would resonate for decades to come. The very arithmetic of Allied victory was being calculated not through battlefield tactics, but through production figures that would obliterate every preconceived notion maritime experts held about the limits of shipbuilding, the timeframes of construction, and the very essence of industrial potential. This profound shift began on December 27, 1940, the day Henry J. Kaiser put his name on his first shipbuilding contract, a man who had never constructed a ship, never directed a shipyard, and whose entire career had been dedicated to moving mountains of earth and pouring rivers of concrete for colossal dam projects across the American West. And yet there he was, a 58-year-old construction magnate, having just given his word to the United States Maritime Commission that he would deliver 30 cargo vessels for the British government inside of 2 years. See the established shipbuilders dismissing him as an uninformed opportunist. The Todd Bath Iron Works, one of the nation's most venerable shipyards, had begrudgingly consented to partner with Kaiser, believing their deep-seated expertise would surely balance out his profound ignorance. What none of them could yet comprehend was that Kaiser's utter lack of shipbuilding experience was destined to become his single greatest strength. Among the observers was William Francis Gibbs, America's most celebrated naval architect, whose firm, Gibbs and Cox, had birthed the Liberty ship blueprints from British designs. He had conceived of more ships than Kaiser had likely ever laid eyes on. The voyage from doubt to revolution embarked within the planning offices of Todd Shipyards in New York. As Kaiser and his engineers scrutinized traditional shipbuilding processes in early 1941, they saw with immediate clarity that conventional approaches would never satisfy the crushing demands of wartime. Kaiser's lead engineer, Clay Bedford, had just weeks prior visited a Ford Motor Company assembly line in Detroit. Bedford had observed automobile chassis gliding down production lines as workers seamlessly installed pre-made components at every station. He came back to California utterly convinced that ships could be created in precisely the same manner. The seasoned shipbuilders found this comparison utterly ludicrous. The first genuine shockwave hit with Kaiser's proposition to do away with riveting altogether. Understand that traditional ship construction was built on rivets, heated metal pins that were hammered through overlapping steel plates to bind them. A highly skilled riveting team, working with flawless coordination, might install about 100 rivets in a day. Each Liberty ship, built the old way, would demand approximately 1 million rivets. Kaiser instead championed the use of electric arc welding, a method he had perfected while constructing pipelines across the great American West. Vice Admiral Emory Land, the chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, studied Kaiser's plan with profound skepticism. His private letters, now preserved in the National Archives, betray the maritime establishment's collective reaction. Welding has never been proven dependable for hull construction on this scale. The British Navy outright forbids welding on the hulls of its warships. Kaiser is asking us to wager America's vital supply lines on an untested technology. And yet Land also felt the cold grip of desperation. German U-boats and surface warships were sending Allied shipping to the ocean floor faster than traditional shipyards could possibly build replacements. In the year 1941 alone, roughly 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping would be lost to all causes. Britain was, quite literally, facing starvation. America's shipyards, clinging to their conventional methods, needed an average of 230 days to build a single cargo vessel. At that rate, the Allies were on a path to lose the Battle of the Atlantic long before American industry could ever mount a meaningful response. The approval of Kaiser's contract was not an act of confidence, but an act of sheer necessity. The Richmond shipyard rose from barren mudflats between January and December of 1941. Kaiser's construction teams, seasoned by building dams and highways, erected a facility that utterly appalled traditional maritime engineers. In place of the massive gantry cranes and longitudinal building ways that defined established shipyards, Richmond presented something entirely alien. The yard was configured like an automobile assembly plant, with wide-open areas for prefabrication encircling 7 parallel building ways. A network of railroad tracks crisscrossed the facility, engineered to transport enormous steel sections weighing up to 150 tons. Overhead cranes, with the power to lift entire segments of a ship, stood at attention every 100 feet. John Riley, the chief naval architect for Bethlehem Steel Corporation, and a man with 30 years of shipbuilding experience, toured the Richmond yard in May 1941. His inspection report, stamped confidential at the time, was a mixture of technical critique and a reluctant, grudging respect. Kaiser has defied every principle of efficient shipyard layout that I have learned over 3 decades. His prefabrication zones are far too expansive. His crane capacity is absurdly over the top. His building ways are too short. And yet I am forced to concede that the facility is engineered for precisely what he says it is: the rapid assembly of prefabricated sections. The arrival of the workforce heralded the next stage of this revolutionary transformation. Traditional shipyards would recruit from established maritime towns where skills were handed down from father to son across generations. Kaiser, however, placed advertisements in newspapers all across America, dangling wages 20% higher than standard industrial pay, and vowing to train anyone who was willing to work. The initial waves of these new workers arrived in Richmond in August 1941. The strategy of breaking down complex tasks into repeated, simple operations, borrowed directly from assembly line manufacturing, proved to be devastatingly effective. By October 1941, Kaiser had over 10,000 workers in Richmond, with fewer than 200 of them possessing any prior maritime experience. Traditional welders would spend 4 years as apprentices, learning a comprehensive array of skills. Kaiser's instructors, in contrast, taught specific techniques for specific jobs in about 2 weeks. Workers didn't need to be masters of all welding. They only needed to perfectly execute the vertical seams on bulkheads, or the horizontal deck plates, or the curved hull sections, a task they would perform again and again and again. As these workers honed their skills through late 1941 and into early 1942, something entirely unexpected began to unfold. The time it took to build Liberty ships started to plummet dramatically. Kaiser's first Liberty ship consumed 197 days to build and deliver. Ship number 2 took 169 days. Ship number 5 required 128 days. Ship number 10 needed only 97 days. By the spring of 1942, Richmond was completing Liberty ships in an average of 70 days. The old guard shipyards watched with mounting alarm as this supposedly unskilled workforce achieved production velocities that equaled their own highly trained crews. The prefabrication method that traditional builders had so easily dismissed was now demonstrating its awesome power. Instead of constructing ships piece by piece from the keel to the deck, Kaiser's yards were fabricating entire sections simultaneously all over the facility. While one team assembled a bow section in the prefabrication area, other teams were building stern sections, deck houses, engine rooms, and bulkheads in parallel. Once the sections were finished, colossal cranes would lift them onto the building ways where welding crews would join them together. Albert Wooding, a production supervisor at Richmond Yard Number 2, articulated this efficiency in a 1943 Fortune magazine interview. In traditional shipbuilding, you cannot put in the engine until the engine room is constructed. You cannot construct the engine room until the hull is finished. Everything must happen in a sequence. Kaiser's method enables parallel production. While one team welds hull plates, another team assembles the engine in a separate space. When both are complete, we simply drop the finished engine into the finished engine room and weld it into place. Tasks that once consumed weeks now took mere hours. The statistics of this parallel production unveiled a level of manufacturing efficiency that seemed utterly impossible to conventional builders. A traditional shipyard might have 50 workers trying to install an engine over a 3-week period, all crowded into the tight confines of a partially built engine room. Kaiser's prefabrication model assigned 200 workers to assemble the entire engine and its mounting structure in a spacious, open workshop over 5 days, then used cranes to position the whole assembly in a single 8-hour shift. Even more unsettling to the traditional maritime authorities was the casual discarding of shipbuilding practices that were centuries old. Ships had always been built from meticulously drafted plans that spelled out every last detail. Kaiser employed simplified drawings that provided only the basic dimensions, leaving the finer points to the worker's judgment. The traditional builders saw this as pure recklessness. Kaiser called it flexibility. Vice Admiral Howard Vickery, vice chairman of the Maritime Commission and a career naval officer, initially resisted Kaiser's simplified specifications. His journey from skeptic to advocate, chronicled in commission meeting minutes, showcases the power of results over theory. In January 1942, I fought against Kaiser's request to simplify the drawing specifications. Ships are not cars. Maritime construction demands precision. But by March, Kaiser's yards were outproducing our traditional contractors by 40%. By June, that gap had stretched to 70%. I came to understand that perfection is the enemy of the good enough. Kaiser's ships were not things of beauty. They were adequate, and adequate ships delivered more cargo than perfect ships that were still being built. As construction speed surged through the spring and summer of 1942, a spirit of competition ignited among Kaiser's 7 shipyards scattered across California, Oregon, and Washington. His son Edgar, who acted as vice president and general manager, supervising all the Kaiser shipyards with a special focus on the 3 in the Pacific Northwest, was in charge of the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation in Portland. Clay Bedford was at the helm of the Richmond yards in California. The two men, both intensely driven and ambitious, launched an informal contest to see which of their facilities could construct ships the fastest. The race between Richmond and Portland evolved into a public phenomenon through the fall of 1942. Newspapers reported the updates like they were sports scores. Production records were shattered repeatedly until Oregon Shipbuilding constructed the Joseph N. Teal in an astonishing 10 days in September 1942. Vice Admiral Vickery eventually had to call a halt to the speed competitions, dismissing them as stunt demonstrations that were a distraction from real production targets. But the contest had already served Kaiser's purpose. Workers across all 7 yards now felt that extraordinary speed was not just achievable, but it was expected. November 1942 was the stage for the ultimate display. Vice Admiral Land, while visiting Richmond to inspect production, made a casual comment to journalists that was overheard by Clay Bedford. The admiral noted that Liberty ship construction had improved dramatically, but mentioned that the recent speed record was still pale in comparison to what mass production had accomplished in other industries. Bedford perceived this remark as a direct challenge. He proposed to Vice Admiral Land that Richmond Yard No. 2 would endeavor to build a complete Liberty ship, from the laying of the keel to its launch in under 10 days, effectively slicing the Joseph N. Teal's record in half. Land, though skeptical, was intrigued and gave his authorization for the attempt on the condition that it would not interfere with regular production schedules. Bedford chose the 47th hull to be built at Yard No. 2 for this record-setting effort. The ship was to be named the SS Robert E. Peary, in honor of the Arctic explorer. Beginning on Sunday, November 8th, at 1 minute past midnight, over 1,000 workers, operating in meticulously coordinated shifts, would attempt something that had never been done in maritime history. The prefabrication strategy was taken to its absolute zenith during the Perry's construction. Every single major component had been built, inspected, and positioned before the keel even made contact with the building way. The bow section, a composite of more than 50 individual parts, had been fully welded and outfitted with its anchor hardware, chain lockers, and forward crew quarters before the assembly even commenced. The stern section arrived complete with its steering gear, propeller shaft, and aft crew spaces. 4 entire cargo holds, each one a massive rectangular steel structure, were weighted and ready to be lifted into place. The engine, a 140-ton triple-expansion steam power plant constructed by Joshua Hendy Ironworks in Sunnyvale, had been mounted on its foundation and tested before it even left the factory. Where conventional shipyards built from keel to deck over a span of months, Kaiser's yards assembled a nearly complete ship from pre-made sections in a matter of days. 4 days into the construction, the hull was finished. The engine was installed, the deck houses were positioned, the cargo holds were secured, and the steering gear was mounted. On Thursday, November 12th, at 3:30 p.m., just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel had touched the building way, the SS Robert E. Perry slid down the launching rails and into the San Francisco Bay. The ship was officially delivered for service on November 15th, establishing another record of 7 days, 14 hours, and 32 minutes from the keel laying to its full delivery. The crowd of onlookers included maritime officials, military officers, rival shipyard owners, and journalists from all over America. Many had come expecting to see either a failure or a compromised vessel that merely looked complete, but was not functional. What they witnessed instead was a fully operational ship that needed only minor outfitting before it could enter service. Vice Admiral Land, who was present for the launch, delivered brief remarks that were captured by newsreel cameras. His words encapsulated the maritime establishment's forced acknowledgement that the world had irrevocably changed. 6 months ago, I would have declared this impossible. The traditional wisdom of shipbuilding, gathered over 3,000 years, insisted that you cannot build a proper ship in 5 days. Henry Kaiser has rendered traditional wisdom obsolete. The United States Maritime Commission will now mandate that all contracted shipyards adopt these methods. The psychological blow to traditional shipbuilders was both profound and immediate. The very same yards that had written Kaiser off as an ignorant amateur just 18 months prior were now dispatching engineers to study his methods. The president of New York Shipbuilding Corporation, one of America's oldest and most esteemed yards, visited Richmond in December 1942. His confidential report to his board of directors exposed a complete ideological collapse regarding their traditional ways. Kaiser has accomplished what our industry deemed impossible by simply refusing to acknowledge our limitations. He approached shipbuilding as a manufacturing challenge, not as a craft tradition. He simplified where we strove for perfection. He standardized where we customized. He trained masses of unskilled labor where we nurtured generational expertise. The outcome is ships constructed in 1/10 of the time at 2/3 of the cost. We must either embrace his methods or resign ourselves to irrelevance. By early 1943, Kaiser's influence had utterly reshaped American maritime production. 18 shipyards across the nation were now constructing Liberty ships using prefabrication and welding. The average construction time had plunged from an initial 230 days to a mere 42 days by the middle of 1943. The United States was launching 3 Liberty ships every single day, more tonnage than German submarines could possibly sink. But perhaps the most seismic challenge to the old maritime authority came from the very nature of Kaiser's workforce. The tens of thousands of women, minorities, and untrained workers who had built these vessels represented a direct refutation of the ancient guild system that had held dominion over shipbuilding for centuries. At the height of production in 1944, Kaiser's 7 yards employed around 196,000 workers. Of this number, over 40,000 were women, a remarkable percentage for female industrial labor at the time. By mid-1944, women constituted 27% of Richmond's production workforce. The three Northwest Kaiser yards alone employed over 31,000 women by 1944. African American workers numbered in the tens of thousands, holding skilled positions that included welding, fitting, crane operation, and even supervisory roles, a degree of workplace integration that was highly unusual for 1940s America. The democratization of skilled labor that Kaiser set in motion carried implications that extended far beyond wartime production. By demonstrating that complex manufacturing could be executed by trained workers rather than demanding generational craft mastery, Kaiser's shipyards called into question fundamental beliefs about labor, skill, and industrial organization. Christmas of 1943 offered another powerful illustration of Kaiser's transformed industrial culture. While traditional shipyards marked the holiday with a day or two off, Kaiser's facilities kept their production schedules running. But instead of just demanding work, Kaiser's organization created Christmas celebrations that honored the workers' sacrifices. At the Richmond yards, management organized for Christmas dinner to be served in the facility cafeterias, with turkey, ham, and all the traditional fixings provided free of charge to the workers on shift. Local churches dispatched carolers. The Richmond Municipal Band performed. Kaiser himself toured the yards, shaking hands with workers and personally expressing his gratitude for their service. By the middle of 1944, Kaiser's 7 shipyards had turned out over 800 Liberty ships. But the impact of his methods reached far beyond his own operations. The 18 American shipyards building Liberty ships had collectively produced 2,400 vessels by this time. Victory ships, a larger and faster design that augmented Liberty production from 1944 onwards, were constructed using the very same prefabrication and welding techniques. The sum total of American maritime production between 1941 and 1945 surpassed 5,500 vessels, which represented approximately 53 million tons of shipping. The sheer scale of this production was breathtaking to contemporary observers, and remains impressive even by modern measures. Commander Joseph Kenworthy of the Royal Navy, assigned to the British Admiralty delegation in Washington, observed American production with a mix of admiration and envy. His official reports to the Admiralty, declassified in the 1980s, captured the British view on American industrial supremacy. The United States is building merchant shipping at a pace that outstrips the combined capacity of the entire rest of the world. Kaiser alone generates more tonnage each month than the whole of the British shipbuilding industry. Their methods are crude by Admiralty standards. Their ships are inelegant, but they stay afloat. They transport cargo, and there are thousands upon thousands of them. The Royal Navy built the world's finest warships using traditional craftsmanship that took years for each vessel. The Americans build adequate ships in weeks. Adequate multiplied by thousands will always defeat perfection, multiplied by dozens. But perhaps the most extraordinary facet of Kaiser's transformation was what transpired after the war concluded. Traditional analysts foresaw the wartime shipbuilding boom collapsing, leaving tens of thousands of workers jobless and hundreds of expensive facilities derelict. This prediction turned out to be partially correct. Liberty ship production ceased in September 1945. By December, Kaiser's workforce had shrunk from 200,000 to fewer than 20,000. The Richmond shipyards that had employed 100,000 workers at their zenith stood mostly deserted by the spring of 1946. And yet, the knowledge forged during this emergency program did not vanish. The prefabrication techniques, the welding procedures, and the parallel assembly methods that Kaiser had pioneered became the standard practice in global shipbuilding. When Japan and South Korea rebuilt their maritime industries in the 1950s and 1960s, they studied Kaiser's Liberty ship program and adopted his methods as the very foundation of their yards. The immense shipbuilding facilities in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, which would go on to dominate world shipping construction for decades, were the direct descendants of the revolutionary practices born in the Richmond shipyards. John Bunker, a professor of maritime history at the State University of New York Maritime College, encapsulated Kaiser's enduring influence in his definitive study published in 1972. Kaiser came into shipbuilding as an outsider, oblivious to maritime tradition, unburdened by conventional wisdom, and ready to apply manufacturing principles that the established industry deemed unsuitable for ship construction. In 36 months, he constructed more ships than had been built in America during the entire preceding century. More significantly, he fundamentally changed how ships would be built across the globe for the rest of the 20th century. The modular construction, prefabrication, and welded assembly that Kaiser pioneered are now universal standards. Every modern shipyard, whether it's building container vessels in Korea, oil tankers in Japan, or cruise ships in Europe, employs methods derived from Kaiser's Liberty Ship program. The sheer magnitude of Kaiser's achievement can be quantified in statistics that reveal both the program's scale and its incredible success. Production figures showed 2,510 Liberty ships built across 18 American yards between 1941 and 1945, an average of 1.8 ships per day at peak production. Kaiser's 7 yards alone were responsible for 1,190 ships, making up 27% of the total American wartime merchant shipping constructed under maritime commission contracts. Construction time plummeted from an average of 230 days for the first Liberty ships in 1941 to just 42 days by 1943, with the record holder, the Robert E. Peary, needing only 4 days and 15 hours from its keel laying to its launch. Labor efficiency improved dramatically as workers gained experience. The first Liberty ships demanded approximately 1.1 million worker hours to finish. By 1943, the average worker hours had dropped to around 486,000 per ship. Kaiser's most efficient yards, Richmond Numbers 2 and 3, were able to achieve construction in as few as 350,000 worker hours by implementing 3-shift, 24-hour production schedules and maximizing prefabrication. Cost efficiency mirrored the improvements in scheduling. The first Liberty ships cost between $1.75 and $2.0 million each. By 1943, costs had fallen to $1.8 million, despite increasing wages and material prices, a testament to improved efficiency and the effects of the learning curve. Each Liberty ship displaced 14,245 tons when fully loaded and could carry 10,800 tons of cargo. These vessels could transport 2,840 jeeps, 440 tanks, or 230 million rounds of ammunition in a single journey. Powered by triple expansion steam engines that were intentionally old-fashioned but reliable and easy to produce, the ships could reach speeds of 11 knots, which was sufficient for convoy operations. Training efficiency proved to be equally astounding. Kaiser's schools trained workers for specific tasks in an average of 2 weeks. The fastest training programs could produce proficient spot welders in just 10 days. More complex roles like crane operators or ship fitters required 4 to 6 weeks of training. This stands in stark contrast to traditional maritime apprenticeships, which lasted 4 years for basic competency and 10 years for master craftsman status. The crucial difference was specialization versus comprehensive training. Traditional apprentices learned every aspect of shipbuilding. Kaiser's workers mastered specific repeatable tasks that they would perform hundreds of times. The battle casualty rates among Liberty ships demonstrated their effectiveness, despite the skepticism surrounding the rapid construction methods. Out of the 2,710 Liberty ships built, approximately 200 were lost to enemy action, a loss rate of 7.4%. This compared well with pre-war merchant shipping loss rates and proved that welded construction, though initially suspect, produced seaworthy vessels. Some ships did experience structural failures due to welding defects. 3 Liberty ships broke completely in half because of brittle fracture problems, representing 0.11% of the production. Nearly 1,500 instances of significant brittle fractures were recorded across the Liberty fleet, but catastrophic complete breaks were rare. These failures resulted in improved welding procedures and steel specifications that eliminated the issue by 1944. Longevity. Statistics provided the ultimate vindication of Kaiser's construction methods. Liberty ships, designed as emergency vessels with an expected service life of 5 years, proved to be remarkably resilient. Many continued to serve for decades after the war. The SS John W. Brown, built in 1942, remains operational as a museum ship in Baltimore as of 2024, 82 years after its construction. The SS Jeremiah O'Brien, also built in 1942, is preserved in San Francisco and took part in the 50th anniversary commemoration of D-Day in 1994, actually sailing to Normandy under its own power after 50 years of existence. A third Liberty ship, the SS Hellas Liberty, serves as a static museum ship in Greece. The post-war careers of Liberty ships extended far beyond their designed lifespan. Of the roughly 2,510 Liberty ships that survived the war, about 835 remained in commercial service through the 1960s. Many were sold to foreign shipping companies, where they operated well into the 1970s. The SS Albert M. Boy, the very last Liberty ship built and delivered on October 30, 1945, was not sent to the scrapyard but was converted. Sold in 1964 for $65,557, it was transformed into the fish cannery ship Star of Kodiak in 1965 and remains today as the landlocked headquarters of Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska, still in existence 8 decades after its construction. The economic shockwaves of the Liberty ship program resonated across American industry. The massive demand for steel fueled the expansion of steel production capacity, especially on the West Coast, where Kaiser constructed the Fontana Steel Mill specifically to supply his shipyards. This mill, finished in 1942, 5 months ahead of schedule, produced approximately 700,000 tons of steel annually and established California as a major steel-producing region for the first time. The magnesium needed for incendiary bombs and the aluminum for aircraft were produced in Kaiser plants built to support the integrated war production effort. The effects on employment rippled through communities across California, Oregon, and Washington. The city of Richmond, California, ballooned from a population of 23,000 in 1940 to over 100,000 by 1943, a growth driven entirely by shipyard jobs. Kaiser built Vanport City in Oregon, which for a brief time became the state's second-largest city with a population exceeding 40,000, all of whom worked in the shipyards or their supporting industries. These boomtowns, though temporary, showcased the transformative power of concentrated industrial investment. Healthcare innovation arose as an unforeseen legacy of Kaiser's shipbuilding program. To furnish medical care for his enormous workforce, Kaiser partnered with physician Sidney Garfield to create prepaid healthcare programs that would eventually evolve into Kaiser Permanente, one of America's largest health maintenance organizations. The model of prepaid preventive healthcare that was pioneered in the shipyards went on to influence American medical practice for decades and served over 12 million members by the early 21st century. The workers themselves carried the lessons of their wartime experience forward into decades of peacetime accomplishment. The shipyards provided thousands of young people, particularly women and minorities, with chances to develop skills they would never have been able to access through conventional career trajectories. Those opportunities opened doors that remained open for the rest of their lives. The technological innovations that were developed during the Liberty Ship program had an influence on industries far beyond maritime construction. The welding techniques that were refined under the pressure of wartime became standard practice in structural steel construction, the fabrication of petroleum refining equipment, and the manufacturing of pressure vessels. The prefabrication methods pioneered at Richmond influenced construction practices in housing, bridge building, and industrial facilities. The organizational principles of parallel production, simplified specifications, and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management and industrial engineering education. Professor Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, in an analysis of American industrial competitiveness in a 1985 study, pointed to the Liberty Ship program as a critical case study in swift capability development. Kaiser proved that industrial capacity is not a fixed quantity, but can be created rapidly when necessity dictates. The United States entered World War II with minimal merchant shipbuilding capability. Within 24 months, American yards were producing more tonnage than the rest of the world combined. This demonstrated that industrial infrastructure, workforce skills, and production systems could all be developed at an unprecedented speed when organized correctly. That lesson holds relevance far beyond a wartime emergency. It suggests that perceived limits on industrial capacity often reflect organizational and conceptual barriers rather than physical impossibilities. The psychological transformation that the Liberty Ship program ignited among industrial managers and engineers proved to be as momentous as the physical ships they produced. Before Kaiser, manufacturing executives accepted the conventional wisdom about production limits, skill requirements, and organizational structures. Kaiser showed that conventional wisdom could be profoundly wrong, and that breakthrough performance demanded the questioning of fundamental assumptions. The story of the Liberty Ship ultimately stands as a testament to a deep truth about human capability and industrial possibility. The ships themselves, though vital to Allied victory, mattered less than what their construction revealed. Ordinary people, when given training and opportunity, could achieve extraordinary things. Complex products that had previously required years of craft tradition could be manufactured in weeks using systematized processes. Industries that had been resistant to change for centuries could be revolutionized in months when necessity and innovation converged. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, reflected on the strategic impact of American maritime production in his post-war memoir, published in 1960. "We waged war across 5,000 miles of the Pacific Ocean, supplied by ships that were built faster than the enemy could sink them." Japan's military planners assumed that American industrial capacity, while impressive, was finite. They believed that if they sank enough ships, eventually American logistics would crumble, and we would be forced to the negotiating table. They failed to factor in Henry Kaiser. By 1944, we were replacing our shipping losses faster than they could inflict them. The mathematics of attrition favored the side that could build 3 ships a day over the side that could sink 2 ships a day. Industrial capacity, not martial valor, decided the outcome. The Pacific War was won in the shipyards of Richmond, Portland, and Baltimore, just as much as it was on the beaches of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. In the end, Kaiser's greatest accomplishment was not the 1,490 ships his yards produced, but the transformation of what industries believed was possible. The Robert E. Peary, constructed in less than 5 days, stood as tangible evidence that tradition was not synonymous with truth, that conventional wisdom could be challenged, and that revolutionary improvement demanded revolutionary thinking. The maritime establishment that had dismissed Kaiser as an ignorant outsider in 1940 would spend the decades after 1945 studying and adopting his techniques. The young workers who learned to weld and fit and fabricate carried those skills and that confidence into peacetime careers that rebuilt America's post-war economy. The methods pioneered under the duress of a wartime emergency became the peacetime standards that influenced manufacturing across industries and around the globe. The story of how one civilian's vision made Liberty ships materialize in days instead of months is ultimately a story of transformation through demonstration. It proves that the greatest revolutions often originate from those who are not bound by tradition, that progress requires the questioning of accepted limits, and that human potential far exceeds conventional expectations when it is properly organized and challenged. Kaiser's workers were not superhumans. They were ordinary people who achieved extraordinary results because someone believed they could, and then built the systems that allowed them to prove it. That lesson, demonstrated in the shipyards of Richmond and validated by 2010 completed vessels, remains relevant wherever industries face challenges that conventional wisdom declares to be impossible. The Liberty ships are mostly gone now, either scrapped decades ago or resting on the ocean floors. But the revolution they symbolized endures in every modern shipyard, in every manufacturing plant that uses prefabrication, in every training program that teaches specific skills quickly instead of broad expertise slowly, and in every manager who questions whether impossible truly means impossible, or if it simply means that nobody has figured out how to do it yet. That is Henry Kaiser's lasting legacy, carved not in steel, but in a transformed understanding of what dedicated people can accomplish when they are freed from the shackles of tradition and challenged to attempt what the experts claim cannot be done. From December 1940, when he signed his first contract knowing nothing about shipbuilding, to November 1942, when the Robert E. Peary was launched after less than 5 days of construction, to September 1945, when the last Liberty ship was delivered, Kaiser proved that industrial revolutions occur not through incremental adjustments, but through a fundamental reimagining of what is possible. The 2010 Liberty ships built between 1941 and 1945 carried more than just cargo across the oceans. They carried the proof that human ingenuity, when unshackled from tradition and empowered by necessity, can achieve the seemingly impossible.